And welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. And on this podcast, we're going to put together both the classical and the Keynesian ideas all on one graph. So we got the aggregate demand curve, the short run aggregate supply curve, which is more of the Keynesian point of view, and the long run aggregate supply curve, which is more of the classical point of view. And we're going to say that the government, in this case, is not going to respond to anything that happens in the economy. That's a classical point of view. They're just going to kind of stay out of the way, laissez-faire, hands off, and kind of whatever happens. And we want to go through what happens if there's an external shock to the economy and the government stays out of the way. So we're going to do an example of this from the classical point of view, and then later on in another video I'll do an example of this same thing from the Keynesian point of view. So let's start with a stock market decline of 89%. So this is what happens in 1929 with the stock market crash. At the beginning of the 30s in 1929, and my determinant that's going to change is I'm going to say that this causes a change in consumption wealth. This is a change in consumption wealth. So obviously people's wealth is going to decline as a result of this decline in stock prices of 89%. So people are going to be less wealthy, and if wealth goes down, then people are going to engage in less consumption. So the aggregate demand curve, as a result, is going to shift into the left. The aggregate demand curve is going to shift into the left. And so my aggregate demand story is going to be a decrease in wealth, which will cause a decrease in consumption. That's my aggregate demand story. And then as that happens, as people buy less stuff, that's going to cause the prices of goods and services in the economy to decline. So prices are going to begin to fall. Prices are going to begin to fall. This story, by the way, is just a determinant. Don't let the fact that I'm using this language story confuse you. I'm just trying to kind of restate what is happening with our determinants. So my determinant here, we had the aggregate demand curve shift into the left due to a decrease in wealth, which decreases consumption. That's just our aggregate demand story. That's just this determinant. Now, let's also record here the aggregate demand curve shifted into the left. And so when that happens, people buy less stuff, and that means prices are going to decline. And then as prices decline, that's going to result in movement along the aggregate supply curve. So we're going to need an aggregate supply story. So we're going to move along the short-run aggregate supply curve. We're going to move along the short-run aggregate supply curve. And the reason why this is just we just have to tell a story for moving along the curve. And what's one of the move along the curve stories? Well, we did examples of these on a previous podcast, but one of them is sticky wages. One of them is sticky wages. So what does sticky wages mean? Well, this means that, remember, the real wages, our argument here is that real wages are equal to nominal wages divided by the price level. Okay? Real wages are nominal wages divided by the price level. And so we were going to say this: if nominal wages, I'm sorry, this is a little bit hard to see. This just says nominal wages right here. If nominal wages are sticky, here, that's a little hard to see here. I'm just going to get rid of this sticky wages stuff. Sticky wages is correct. I'm just not going to write it there because it's just not going to fit. It's kind of hard to see. So let's try this again. Because of sticky wages, real wages are equal to nominal wages over the price level. Okay, now you can see that a little better. And if nominal wages are sticky, so sticky wages if nominal wages are sticky in the short run, they don't change, then that means that as people buy less stuff and prices come down, that means real wages are going to rise, okay? So if someone's making $50,000 a year and prices go down and they're still making $50,000 a year, their nominal wages have not changed, then real wages are going to rise. Real wages are going to rise. And if real wages go up, then what are companies going to do? They're going to respond to the higher real wages by decreasing the number of workers that they hire, because those workers are now more expensive, and as a result of that, you're going to get a decrease in the gross domestic product, okay? That's the whole sticky wages story. So gross domestic product is going to fall, and here that's right here. GDP is going to fall. And as GDP falls, well, let's record that over here. So prices are going to go down, gross domestic product is going to go down, and then that's going to create unemployment. That's going to create unemployment. Unemployment is going to rise. Now, unemployment's going to be the key to our story. This is going to be our key right here. As unemployment rises, as you get increases in unemployment, that's going to cause the new real-world event up here. Okay, so that increase in unemployment means that we're going to have a lot of surplus workers, and those surplus workers are eventually going to put downward pressure on nominal wages. Those surplus workers are going to put downward prices eventually on nominal wages. In the short run, those wages are sticky, maybe because there's contracts that people have, that workers have. But when those contracts come to an end, those unemployed workers are now going to compete for jobs, and nominal wages are going to begin to decline. So my new determinant is going to be a change in wages, and change in wages is going to be on the short run aggregate supply curve. If wages go down, then companies are going to be able to hire more workers, and that means they're going to be able to increase production. And so that's going to cause the short run aggregate supply curve to shift to the right. That's going to cause the short run aggregate supply curve to shift out to the right. So the high unemployment eventually will put downward pressure on wages, and that will cause companies to be willing to hire more workers again, and that's going to cause an increase in production. So my aggregate supply story is now going to be, originally it was sticky wages move along the curve. That's what happened here. But now the aggregate supply curve itself is going to shift, and that's going to be because wages go down. So the decrease in wages is going to cause companies to increase production. That's going to cause companies to increase production. And as companies increase production, then that's going to cause prices to go down even further. That's going to cause prices to fall even more as companies increase production. And as that happens, we're going to move along the aggregate demand curve. We're going to move along the aggregate demand curve, and so that's going to cause three things to happen. That's going to cause the wealth effect, the interest rate effect, and the international trade effect. So I'm going to write that outside the box here just because I don't want to run out of room again. But you have the wealth effect, the interest rate effect, and the international trade effect. All three of those are going to begin to happen. We talked about those on a previous podcast. Those are all the things that move us along the aggregate demand curve. And let's just pick one. Let's just do the international trade effect, for example. As wages go down in the United States, if this is the United States, and gross domestic product is going to rise, companies begin producing more. As they produce more stuff, prices are going to go down because there's more goods and services available. And as prices go down in the United States, as you get a decrease in the price level in the United States, that's going to cause foreign people in foreign countries to buy more of our goods so that our exports will rise, and that causes our net exports to rise, and that is a movement along the aggregate demand curve. Spending is going to go up, and so when the spending goes up, that's going to cause the gross domestic product to go back up. So what happens finally at the end? What happens at the end is prices are lower than they were from the beginning. Prices went down. Gross domestic product, here's the language I'm going to use. I'm going to say the gross domestic product finished where it started. The gross domestic product was at Y1. We fell into a recession. GDP went down, but now GDP went back up. So gross domestic product, we could say finishes, we'll call it here at Y3, but Y3 is just the same level of production as Y1. So the GDP is going to come back to where it was before, and then of course unemployment, when you fell into recession, unemployment went up, and now unemployment is going to come back down, and unemployment is now going to finish where it started. Unemployment's going to finish where it started. So the key to this whole thing is that unemployment will eventually put pressure on wages, and that will cause companies to start hiring people again, and now the short and aggregate supply curve will shift. So see, the economy, it fixes itself. It is self-regulating according to the classical economists. So just notice some general things then here. What happens is typically is the aggregate demand curve is going to shift and knock us out of equilibrium. And then the aggregate supply curve is going to shift in response and get us back to long-run equilibrium. So that's the key, is this long-run equilibrium, and we get knocked out of long-run equilibrium, and then we come back into long-run equilibrium. We get knocked out of long-run equilibrium, and then we come back to long-run equilibrium. That's how all of this plays out. That's how all of this plays out. Okay, so that's how the classical model works. We just made the argument from the classical side. In a future video, we will make the argument from the Keynesian point of view. We'll make the argument from the Keynesian point of view. All right, this has been Mr. Hagan on another podcast. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you on the next podcast.